Hello everybody, and welcome back to another edition of When Movies Were Good, hosted by Rachel and my special guest star, my weekly special guest star, one of my closest friends, Matt. Matt, how are you doing tonight? We are recording in person.
I know, I can't believe it. All the better to hear you from you, my dear.
I know. Many technical glitches over the last 4 or so months, but as you've known, if you've listened to us, we were in a sort of state of lockdown, like a severe lockdown for quite a while. So we're actually able to meet up again in person, although we are still being socially distant.
Don't worry, we have a microphone separating us.
Yeah, so Matt's brought his microphone rig and everything with him, which is actually kind of fun. It's cool. So
yeah, I feel like a pro.
Yeah, we feel like a pro, and we're loving it. And welcome to our Ingrid Bergman double. And we are doing Casablanca, which is a fantastically famous film, one of the most famous films ever made, but also another film that has sort of captured sort of modern consciousness simply because of the term, the modern terminology that is now associated with that film, and that's Gaslight. So these are Ingrid Bergman's films. It's an Ingrid Bergman double, and we will be mentioning her sort of especially throughout the commentary or our discussion. So let's just start with Casablanca first. Not that it needs any introduction, Matt.
No, it's the show that needs no introduction. I think it's a film that's on many people's desert island list.
Yeah, definitely. So let's just quickly recap Casablanca just for the audience, just to get a bit of information out there about the film. So it's a 1942 American, I guess you could consider it a romantic drama, and it is an American wartime drama. It was made and released at that time. Directed by Michael Curtis, and of course starring Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman and Paul Henreid. So this film, the basic storyline of this film is it focuses on an American expatriate, so Humphrey Bogart, who lives in Casablanca, and he basically has to choose between his love for a woman, which is Ingrid Bergman, and helping her and her husband, Czech resistance leader, escape from the Vichy-controlled city of Casablanca to continue their fight against the Germans. So the film was actually based on an unreleased play called Everybody Comes to Rick, which is Humphrey Bogart's character. So it was an unproduced stage play by Murray Burnett, and basically the studio bought the rights to the piece, and then they made the film from there. So the screenplay was written by Julius Epstein, Philip Epstein and Howard Koch. It's based, of course, on the play. The music is by Max Steiner. The cinematography is by Arthur Edelson. Anything else? And it was primarily actually shot all out in Burbank. So they never went anywhere near Casablanca. It was all, but it doesn't matter. It looks fantastic. And Matt, why don't you start the discussion off on this one, because I know this is one of your favourites.
Yeah, I love it so much. I've seen it quite a few times. I think the dialogue, it's absolutely perfect, and I think it's very appropriate that so much of the Academy Award attention for this film went towards the writers. Mm-hmm. Yes, both Bogart and Bergman are incredible actors of their generation and, frankly, of all time. But those classic lines, they are what brings the film to life. And it really is a very studio picture. It's about the creative talent of that studio backlot, and to indicate just how studio that film is. You know that famous scene where they're at the airport, it's really misty, they have the plane going along. Do you know why they had all that fog and mist there?
I think I was just reading about it today, but I'll get you to explain why.
Well, it was basically because the fake plane looked like absolute crap, and they were just doing their best to hide the evidence.
Yes, I didn't actually know about that until I was sort of researching the film a bit today before we had a discussion about it. But there is no question that the film is an extraordinarily beautiful film. Even though it's black and white, it manages to have this kind of colour palette to it in a way. Now, would you consider this film, it's not a film noir, this film though, is it?
Well, it's funny actually, I was watching a video on YouTube this morning of one of various sort of film critics discussing this movie over breakfast, because that's what I do. I watch movie reviews and movie critiques and such things when I eat my meals. And he was talking about how, because of the sort of twist at the end, spoiler alert, of when Bogart declares that Bergman is not going to be going with him back to Casablanca, but she's going to be on the plane, that it actually, in the mind of that critic, turns it to a bit more like film noir.
Okay.
And now, of course, this is always a complex topic, because film noir is a sort of a term that's really pushed around a lot. But in terms of technical points of view, you could agree with that. In terms of it's not so much a romance in the George Cukor style, where you have a lot of artificial light and everything. It has this rosy tint over it. It's all very grit and reality of the light and so you have all those stereotypical elements like the blind shadows and everything. But in terms of the plot, it does certainly have a much of that moral study that we characterize with noir, but it has, for one thing, the romance of the story dominates, which in my mind makes it more of a hint of a film noir, not a true film noir.
Okay.
But add to that also is that the film noir was typically about searching for the darkness within. This is more a film about showing how everybody is essentially good.
Yes, that's it was. I mean, some people call it more of a romantic sort of drama as well. I suppose for me as a woman, if I'm going to watch something like that, I really have to have a buy-in with the male lead, and I suppose I'm going to go a bit against the grain here. I'm just not that into Humphrey Bogart. It's nothing personal against him. I get the attraction. I understand why he was such an attractive force in cinema, but
well, he must have got Lauren Bacall to like him somehow. He must have had some magnetism.
I don't know. I was thinking about Lauren Bacall. I'm like, I don't know. I think she worked with some other guys I probably would have found a bit more attractive, but he just is not my type. Now, if it was Ray Melange in this role, I think I majorly could have gotten into it. And also, so if we go over and we talk about Ingrid Bergman, of course she was Swedish. And I like her. Yeah, you do? Yeah, she's your... Look, I suppose... Because when you watch American classic films, you're just not that, I mean, there's English people bouncing around in them, and, we've got Claude Rains in this film, and, there's English people bouncing around, and, we had Marlene Dietrich and things like that. So you do get European people, but I just think I always found Ingrid Bergman's accent quite harsh in comparison to her American counterparts. And I don't know whether that always gave me a little bit of a, it's Ingrid Bergman, okay. You know what I mean? She just has a bit of a jarring voice to me. So, I don't mean to be negative at all, but it's just, I always keep thinking I probably might have liked the film if there were two different leads. And I know that is absolutely sacrilege, but...
Controversial.
I know. I always have to go against the grain, though. You know me. I didn't not like the film. I just loved the look of the film, like that whole thing at the airport at the end, and he's looking at you, kid. I didn't actually realise that piece of dialogue, he's looking at you, kid, was actually one of his Bogey's lines. And he actually said that to Ingrid Bergman because he was playing poker with her on the set and teaching her poker.
Yeah.
And he said that to her, like, if she got a good hand or something, he's looking at you, kid, or it's your turn to go or something. So that's where that line came from, and then they just they put it into the script, but it was never in the original screenplay.
Well, a story I love about another famous line, Round Up the Usual Suspects, is that the two twin brothers who were writing much of the screenplay were just on a road trip somewhere, and it just spontaneously came to them, apparently, when they were driving through the woods somewhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just, I think as I go on and watch more, I think there's going to be other Humphrey Bogart films that I like more. And I think as I go on and watch more of Ingrid Bergman, and of course I will, I think there's just going to be films. I think they needed to have a particular kind of chemistry I was looking for. And even though everyone loves their chemistry in this film, it just wasn't necessarily getting me there.
I suppose it connects with different people in different ways, because I can sort of feel a great connection with those two. What I was thinking about just today was the Laszlo, who Bergman is allegedly supposed to be in this special relationship. I find actually there to be very little chemistry with her latter husband.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, to the construction of the storyline, makes sense, because you want to be sympathetic to Rick's character.
Yes.
You want them to end up together.
Yes.
Laszlo is just too he's too devoted to his role in history.
Yeah, I think so. I think, just looking through, so of course Ingrid Bergman is Swedish, and she was born in Stockholm in 1915 and started acting over there in Swedish and German films. And then she obviously, how Matt and I just love how people can immigrate over to classic Hollywood and start working in films. She did Spellbound and Notorious with Alfred Hitchcock. I actually wouldn't mind seeing Joan of Arc with her 1948. I haven't actually ever seen that. That's
part of my very large to watch DVD collection. I buy way more than I have time to watch.
We might have to make that a big, pair that film up with another big historical sort of film at some point. Yeah. So I would really... And look, she had a very varied career and worked consistently right up until she passed away, unfortunately. And she wasn't old when she passed away. She was 67 in 1982.
I think she had breast cancer or something.
Did. Yeah, she did. And I have nothing but respect for her at all, but I think sometimes I always sort of... It's just sometimes her accent, and I suppose they can pretty much write her into any film and explain why she would have the accent, but sometimes I feel like maybe an American actress could have done that, or an English actress could have done that a little bit better, but it's just a personal thing. It's nothing big deal.
I suppose when you're talking about a story that's set in a part of Africa where there's a lot of refugees chasing away from the war in Europe, and they actually met in Paris.
Yes.
So you'll have a story about two refugees going to one country and then refuging to another country.
Yeah,
so
I think it was...
It kind of makes more sense that you have a clash of
actually, I think they
cultures.
did reference that in the script, that how they met up and everything. And I also forgot that Ingrid Bergman, that is, was married to Roberto Rossellini, and of course Isabella Rossellini is their daughter. So that's all coming back to me now.
It was a bit of a scandal at the time. I think I can't remember if one of them was in wedlock or something at the time, or
it probably. I know that she was married beforehand. And you're probably right, because as most of these, relationships are, there's sort of a bit of a doubling up on when the person was married and divorced, etc. But she definitely, she was a very brave person to come over and make her way to Los Angeles, and a very, very beautiful woman. So I love just the whole concept of Casablanca. I love the look of the film, the light and shade of it. I love, of course, the music in the film, as you... Am I going to start singing? Play it again, Sam. I mean, it is a bit schlocky and it's a bit over the top, but it is. And it's for those people out there who haven't seen it, you do need to see it. You just need to see it for yourself.
Yeah, it's an incredible power, beautiful visuals. But what's fascinating is that it's actually nobody involved in the production expected it to be as great a hit as it was.
That's right.
It seems to be this unwritten rule that for a story most of the time, for a story to be really successful, it seems that to require that nobody expects anything of it when it's made, because this is a time when Hollywood functioned like a factory. They produced so many hundreds of films a year, and to most of those involved, it was just another film. All those classic lines were rushed out, and the two writers, Epstein and I'm sorry, I forgot his twin's name, but like they, I don't know if they got their way by the studio this time, but they were notorious with the producers for fighting over work hours, and when they finally got their way, just because they were that good, they were just working from home for a couple hours a day, and the rest of the time listening to ball games on the radio and hearing Tennis Dream Life. So they were just
Julius and Philip Epstein.
Yeah, so they were just these two lucky blokes that could just churn out masterpiece words by accident. But even like Bergman, she was not that she had an issue with the film, but just that she was suffered from this artist's curse of only wanting to be involved in masterpieces, and she had almost brushed aside what she was doing at the time when making Casablanca in this mind, because at that time her whole mind was set towards the making of the film For Whom the Bell Tolls, based on one of her Hemingway stories, and so she was really excited about that project, and yet what she regarded as probably just part of her contractual obligation was what so many people came to know her for.
Yeah, no, I had read that about her as well, and that she was very determined with the sort of pieces and the sort of roles that she did take. So if we jump over to the next Ingrid Bergman film that we're going to discuss. But I mean, like Matt and I were saying, you could literally devote about 5 hours to Casablanca and not even touch the tip of everything involved in that film. And there's probably many other podcasters out there who have very long pieces on it. But as we've always said, we just like to discuss the things that we liked about the film or we found interesting. So I think that's kind of what our contribution is, just what we enjoyed or didn't enjoy, or but I know this is one of Matt's. Is there anything else you wanted to say to wrap this little section up before we go on to Gaslight?
Not without probably exhausting a lot of people.
Maybe another time, yes. So thanks. That one was Casablanca. So let's just jump 2 years later. And of course, Ingrid's got herself into another fine mess, as they say. So Gaslight is a 1944 American. So this one's a psychological thriller. And it's adapted from Patrick Hamilton's play Gaslight, which only came out 6 years before, in 1938. So the basic premise so this was the second version of Gaslight that they made. They did a 1940 English film. It's about a woman whose husband slowly manipulates her into believing she's going insane. And the film was, like Casablanca, the film was nominated for several Academy Awards, Best Picture, Actor, Screenplay, and of course she won Best Actress. And they also won Production Design, which I did love the production design of this film. It was fantastic, and also in Casablanca as well. So let's get into this. So this one was directed by George Cukor, of course starring Ingrid Bergman along with Charles Boyer, Joseph Cotten, who I do like, and one of the loves of your life, an 18-year-old Angela Lansbury. Oh, the 80s, we miss it. Oh my gosh. And she actually was nominated for an Oscar in her own right for this, and, considering it was her screen debut. So this film did have a larger scale and a larger budget than the 1940 version of Gaslight. Now, I would like to see that, and I was intending to try and watch it before we podcasted today, but I just didn't get a chance, but I will. So what else can we say about this film here before we get into discussing it? Just having a look here quickly. We'll move into the story first, I think. So, Matt, what were your feelings on Gaslight?
Well, I do love me a good mystery story, and I thought it was... Admittedly, just reading the plot line, it didn't speak to me as much, but I have wanted to see the show for years just because I was curious what Mrs. Fletcher was like when she was young, Angela Lansbury.
Oh, her accent in this was like, I've never heard her speaking that Cockney sort of English accent before.
Yeah, and yet now, when she's been in America for almost 80 years, she's almost taken on a bit of a southern drawl. And she's still going. She'd probably still be working if it weren't for COVID at the moment. Yeah,
I mean, I have to say, but she's one of those people, she's a bit like that Betty White mould, if you're enjoying what you're doing and you're getting work, it just gives you that vitality for life.
Exactly.
And I think the worst thing any kind of performer can do, even if they're not getting roles, is just to give up. There's always a community theatre company somewhere. There's always a local show to go in. I'm sure they'd love to have some of these people, and there's no excuse to not keep going unless you physically can't, you know? So
Well, even if you physically can't, you could surely, I don't know, make your own stop animation show to
commentate. I never understand if an actor who has had success in their career, has had success, and all of a sudden the roles dry up. I mean, there's just so many smaller options to keep you acting that someone might see you and get you into a bigger production again, whether that's, you know, a local theatre company to Broadway or a student film to a larger film, or I just, for the life of me, don't understand it. So I guess that's not a problem Ingrid Bergman had. She always consistently worked right up until sort of, you know, well into the 70s.
On the other spectrum, though, you do have some, that, like Sean Connery, who can have a healthy mentality of knowing sort of when the right time it is to retire. And that's when it's not there trying to cling on to...
Yeah, I think if you're in good health and everything, like Angela Lansbury and Betty White have been right well through their 80s... I think Betty White has obviously slowed down now as she comes up to 100, I think she is. But they know, you're right, you need to know when to call it quits as well. But some people just pull the pin far too early and they're sitting around at home doing nothing. So
in Connery's case, I think he just cared more about his golf swing.
Yeah. And R.I.P. to Sean Connery as well, of course.
Yes, Vale.
So this film for me, here we go again. Sometimes something can be overhyped, I suppose, because everyone uses that term gaslight now, or you're being gaslit. I mean, I think a lot of younger people use it and they don't quite know actually where it comes from, but it does come from this film. So, of course, the reference to gaslighting in this film has to do with the gas lights in the film going up and down, and she's, oh, what's going on here, sort of thing. So it is a literal reference to something that's happening in the film, because remember, it's, I guess this is is this the Edwardian era? Is it the 1800s, like 1880, 90?
Thereabouts. They had gaslights until as late as the 1920s, I think, but considering the general wealth of the area they're working in, I'd say probably up to just before World War One would be an appropriate timing.
Okay,
because most of those areas would have gone to electricity by the end of World War One.
Right. Okay. So there is an actual reason that it is called, because, you know, when the gas lights are flickering, she thinks she's imagining it. It has to do with the psychological manipulation. So I want to talk about the lead male role in this film, and this is what my problem was. I just found. And again, nothing personal against Charles Boyer, and I don't know whether it's the whole French thing or whatever, but I just found his on-screen persona in this role so annoying.
I think that's partly by design,
It is, but I guess, you know, you have to love to hate the person. Yeah. And in that, you know, someone playing a villain like this, I just didn't buy the nice parts of his character. I just thought, God, how can she not see through this? The guy's so annoying. And that's why I wanted to compare it to the first Gaslight, because I wanted to see what the male lead was like in that film. And I don't know, maybe somebody else in the film would have worked more for me. So I thought Ingrid was great. It got a bit screamy towards the end, but I guess what she was going through, that's more than fair enough. But... and again, I think for me also the film was 20 minutes too long. So I just thought they could have condensed it down a little bit with some of these episodes that she was having. And I think the other issue with this film, and I think the play and the first version of the film are a bit different, is Joseph Cotten's character. It was just sort of like, so the setup in the film is Joseph Cotten's character. Was he someone that knew her mother or was a fan of her mother?
He was a fan of her aunt, who was the opera singer.
Opera singer, right. So Ingrid Bergman's character was an opera singer in this and gave it up for Charles Boyer's character. And then, you know, so there's this sort of plot that he is married her to be able to go into the house to search for jewellery that he wants to steal. And I don't know, that's not enough for me.
Well, it's the same way how there's this very tentative connection of Joseph Cotton with her own aunt, and that it's just enough that I respect the cleverness of tying in the story of the glove, and how that introduced him to her aunt. But it seems strange that this woman going through an emotional disparity and not trusting anyone coming inside the house suddenly is won over because he has her aunt's glove.
Yes,
but you forgive it. But it's kind of like when you're watching the James Cameron Titanic and you forgive them for acting rather irrationally below deck to the iceberg coming because they don't know what's up above, and so the tension, forgive my unnecessarily complicated rambling just then, but basically, the drama of the story at that time makes you forgiving of that little plot flaw because you enjoy that release, the connection between the two new characters. That was a much more common sense, simple way to describe it.
Yeah, I think from what I was reading in the play and in the first version, the Joseph Cotten character was a police officer, and he was investigating issues to do with this woman and what was happening with her, and that's why he was coming into it from a law enforcement perspective. And I don't know, I personally probably would have enjoyed that more. I think also how I would have done it if I was doing the script, I probably would have changed it that her aunt or something like that had destroyed his career or something when he was a young man, and then he was hell-bent on revenge, and this was one of the ways I would have preferred something like that. But then again, that's just me.
Yeah, it's the way he has that weird reaction to the letter. You think it could be a bit more sinister. I mean, the implication seems to be that he's some sort of Italian prince. And that he's lost the... Because I'm thinking, if they meant so much to you that way, why didn't you just not get them in the first place? It kind of has the tying-ins of some of those stereotypical Sherlock Holmes stories, like the case of the blue shoe polish or something.
I mean, they did make a case for everything in the script. It just wasn't enough for me. I was like, and because I found his on-screen persona really, there wasn't enough. When he was being lovey with her, and the whole it just wasn't working for me. There was something missing there. Now, if it had been Ray or something, I'm joking. But I think if every
story would be better with Ray maligned, wouldn't it?
I think if I know, but I guess for me, coming at it from a woman's perspective, I suppose for the male lead in the film, I just have to have a bit more buy-in with them. And in these two films, I just didn't have enough buy-in with both Bogey and with Charles. And it's not, I'm determined to see more films with both of them in it. It's not going to stop me. But just if we're getting to sort of like romance and being a husband and all that sort of stuff, I have to feel a bit more of a connection there. And I think that's probably why these films didn't work for me, as well as say maybe, Matt, you're coming at it just from a different point of view. So what did you ultimately think of Gaslight?
I love the style of it.
Yeah, beautiful film.
I think it shows a few of the weaknesses of plotting, which was why, and I keep talking about him, this is why Hitchcock, admittedly himself, didn't like to go for the Agatha Christie whodunit type plot too much. He preferred thrillers, because this has a lot of the elements of a story of one of those early 20th century detective novels where it's in a literary form it could be more forgiving about this plot twist at the end based on the hidden jewel which guides the actions of the characters, but that what Hitchcock called a MacGuffin, the sort of the inanimate or the metaphorical object that is of obsession to the characters, the relationship to that object that they're chasing is not really established clear enough, because we know from the beginning that Bergman's husband is this sleazy character, but we can't really quite tell why.
Yes.
So it does a very good job at making us not like him.
Yes, and it definitely set out to do, but I think
but the motivation is to be set out a lot better.
Yeah. So I'm just really curious to see the 1940 film. I think it just runs a bit shorter. It might be a little bit tighter. And I think that's, you know me, that's what I'm looking for. So, but just to finish off here, someone was actually sort of capped a bit of a screenshot here in regards to Gaslight and some other films of the era that they were comparing it to. So it's, you know, it is a thriller, what they call soaked in paranoia, which is definitely true. So they're comparing it to a couple of Hitchcock's other works like The Lodger and Hanover Square, which I unfortunately haven't seen yet because they're both set in the Edwardian age.
But also Shadow of a Doubt, which also had Joseph Cotten. And it's almost like a opposition of roles for Cotten because everybody would have remembered him at that time from Shadow of a Doubt. And instead of being now the sleazy... the sleazy love object of the heroine, he's now the detective in the background. Yeah,
because they said that this film cycle of the 40s, this reviewer or film critic describes it as the don't trust your husband period. So it began with a couple of Hitchcock's films. So we had Rebecca, Suspicion and Shadow of a Doubt, which Matt just mentioned, and then continued with Gaslight and Jane Eyre, and then Notorious, The Spiral Staircase, which I haven't seen, that I want to see.
Me neither.
The Two Mrs. Carols and Sorry Wrong Number, that's the one with Barbara Stanwyck in it, I think, and Sleep My Love. So all of these films, this film critic was arguing that they use the noir visual vocabulary and share the same premise and narrative structure. Would you agree with that, or...?
It's definitely the beginnings of heading in that direction. The fact that we're talking about a turn-of-the-century storyline that has two very European people moving into the English-speaking world of London does actually indicate how film noir and a lot of the cultural cultural missions of the early 20th century were steeped in this sudden migration of place, and you're seeing different worlds in very different lights, so that Bergman has this very horror vision of London and the story within, while her husband talks about the sort of the homely coziness side of the coin.
Well, they did go to the Tower of London too in the film. That was an interesting scene there. But basically this film critic finishes off with the basic premise and narrative structure of all these films is, you know, the life of the rich sheltered woman is threatened by an older deranged man, often her husband. In all of them, the house usually, which is true, it's a symbol of what they become trapped in. And it's sort of like sheltered security, but it becomes a trap of their terror. And that's a really good way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful and glad to have seen both films. I just love the beauty of both of these films. I think my main issue is probably the running time of both of them. I just go for shorter films that are a little bit compact.
I don't mind at home. I can pause it if I need to use the bathroom. If I need to use the bathroom.
But that's just me, though. I've always been, you know, if I see that 90-minute running time, I love it. I'm really in for that. But anything over 100 minutes, I just like films to kind of have their little area that they concentrate on. But some films like to have a bit more of a sweeping story. That's fine. These were definitely good. I really look forward to seeing actually all the actors who participated in these films and the directors seeing a lot more of their work, a lot more. Definitely. So, just before we go, of course, we will introduce the next two films that we will be doing. We are doing a Sean Connery RIP special. Just wanted to, Sean Connery was just one of the icons out there, and he will be dearly missed, and hopefully he's resting in peace now. So we have to choose some movies from the era that we discuss movies of. So we've chosen, Matt actually chose these films, which I'm looking forward to seeing. They're both in the late 50s. So Another Time, Another Place, and that was Sean Connery and Lana Turner. And then we've got his Walt Disney film that he made in 1959, which is Darby O'Gill and The Little People, and that seems like a lot of fun, so I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and that's the good thing when you have a concentrated theme like us. It means you have to be creative to work towards its aims. And in the case of Sean Connery, we tend to associate him with the 60s pop culture and moving onwards, or even those that know a bit more about him, they may think of him mostly as this character TV actor from a few dramas that he was trying to get into before he made his big break. But he was part of that older generation beginning in the 50s, because people forget that he wasn't like a young 18-year-old when he did James Bond. He was in his early 30s, so
Yes.
he had a bit of a career beforehand, although it was only just starting.
Yes.
And to connect him less with the gadget-driven, high-color, consumeristic type person we think of with the early Bond films, and moving more to his more macho kilt roles in the 70s and 80s, to have this much more humble, finding yourself sort of English, Scottish Marlon Brando type person.
Yeah, I'm actually looking. I'll be honest with you. I've seen several of his 80s films and 90s films that he's done, but I've seen it. I think I've seen one of his Bond films, but I haven't really seen much of his earlier work. So this will be a good opportunity to just start off and dip the toe in and have a look at some of his earlier work and pay a bit of homage to him. So once again, Matt, thanks for joining me in person.
Oh, my pleasure.
This week. I really appreciate you bringing your microphone rig and everything. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you everyone for joining us. So, of course, Matt will just run you through where you can find us on social media.
Yep, so we are on Instagram at When Movies Were Good, the same on Facebook and on Twitter. We release episodes twice a week, so in case you lose track of your watches, please hit the thumbs up, tap subscribe and the bell notification, and you will just simply get notified automatically when we appear.
So in the meantime, everyone, I'm Rachel.
I'm Matthew.
And we're watching good movies. Thank you and good night.